My name is Daniel Carter, and today people call me a successful man. I run a large technology company, speak at conferences, and travel to many countries. When people hear my story, they often ask how I became successful. Some think I was always smart. Others believe I was lucky. But the truth is very different. My life changed because of one person, a teacher. When I was 13 years old, my life was very difficult. My father had left our family 2 years earlier. He simply packed his bags one morning and walked out the door. After that day, we never heard from him again. My mother worked very hard to support us, but life was still a struggle. She worked long hours at a small diner in town. Sometimes she came home very late at night, smelling like coffee and fried food. Because my mother worked so much, I spent most of my time alone. Our apartment was small and quiet. Many nights I sat at the kitchen table doing homework, while my little sister slept in the next room. Other nights, I simply stared at my school books without understanding anything. School was not easy for me. I was always tired, and my mind was full of worries about my family. My grades became worse every month. Teachers often told me I needed to try harder, but they did not understand my life. Eventually, I stopped trying. By the time I started 8th grade, I had already decided something in my mind. I believed school was not important for someone like me. I thought people like me were meant to struggle forever. That year, a new teacher arrived at our school. Her name was Mrs. Thompson. I remember the first time I saw her. She walked into the classroom with a stack of books in her arms and a warm smile on her face. She looked different from the other teachers. Her voice was calm, and her eyes seemed kind. "Good morning, everyone," she said. "My name is Mrs. Thompson, and I will be your English teacher this year." Most students were not paying attention. Some were talking quietly, and others were staring at their phones under the desks. I sat in the back of the classroom near the window. I liked sitting there because it allowed me to look outside instead of listening to the lesson. Mrs. Thompson began teaching that day, but I barely listened. My notebook stayed empty while other students wrote notes. After class ended, I quickly grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. "Daniel," a voice said behind me. I stopped. It was Mrs. Thompson. "Yes?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "I noticed you didn't write anything during class," she said gently. I shrugged. "I already know the lesson," I replied, even though that was not true. She studied my face for a moment. "Well," she said with a small smile, "I hope next time you will still write something. Sometimes writing helps us remember our ideas." I nodded quickly and left the room. At that moment, I believed that conversation would be the end of it. I thought she would forget about me like many other teachers had. But Mrs. Thompson was different. The next day during class, she asked students to read a short story and write a paragraph about it. Everyone started working quietly. I stared at the page without moving my pen. Suddenly, Mrs. Thompson walked toward my desk. "Daniel," she said softly, "why don't you tell me what you think about the story?" "I don't know," I muttered. "Try," she encouraged. I sighed and looked down at the paper. Slowly, I began to speak. "Well, I think the main character feels lonely," I said. "Like nobody understands him." Mrs. Thompson's eyes lit up. "That's a very thoughtful idea," she said. Her reaction surprised me. No teacher had ever called my ideas thoughtful before. "Why do you think he feels that way?" she asked. I shrugged again, but answered quietly. Because he feels like he doesn't belong anywhere. Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. That's an interesting observation, she said. You should write that down. For the first time in a long while, I picked up my pen. It was only a few sentences, but I wrote them. After class, Mrs. Thompson stopped me again. You have a strong voice when you speak about stories, she said. I looked at her, confused. What do you mean? I mean you understand emotions very well, she explained. That's an important skill for writing. No teacher had ever said something like that to me before. I did not know how to respond, so I simply nodded and left. Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Thompson continued speaking with me during class. She asked for my opinion about stories and poems. Sometimes she asked me to read my ideas aloud. At first, I felt uncomfortable, but slowly, something began to change. For the first time, I started paying attention in class. One afternoon after school, I was packing my bag when Mrs. Thompson called my name again. Daniel, could you stay for a moment? She asked. I felt nervous. Usually when teachers asked students to stay after class, it meant trouble. Yes? I said cautiously. She walked to her desk and picked up a small book. I found this in a bookstore yesterday, she said. I thought you might like it. She handed the book to me. It was a novel about a young boy who overcame many difficulties in life. You can borrow it, she said. Just return it when you finish. I stared at the book in surprise. No teacher had ever given me a book before. Why? I asked. Mrs. Thompson smiled gently. Because I think you are capable of more than you believe, she said. Her words stayed in my mind long after I left the classroom. That night, while my sister slept and my mother worked late at the diner, I opened the book. At first, I only planned to read a few pages, but the story pulled me in. The main character faced many struggles, just like I did. For the first time in months, I forgot about my worries and became lost in the story. When I finally looked at the clock, it was past midnight. I closed the book slowly. Something inside me felt different. For the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of hope. I did not realize it then, but that small moment would become the beginning of everything. Because Mrs. Thompson had seen something in me that no one else had ever noticed, and she was not finished helping me yet. In fact, the most important moments were still waiting ahead. After that night, something inside me slowly began to change. I still had the same problems at home. My mother still worked long hours, and money was still very tight. But when I went to school, I no longer felt completely invisible. Mrs. Thompson made sure of that. Every week she asked me questions during class. At first I was nervous speaking in front of other students, but she always encouraged me. If my answer was not perfect, she did not criticize me. Instead, she helped me explain my thoughts better. Your ideas matter, she often told me. Those 3 words meant more to me than she probably realized. One afternoon, about a month after she gave me the book, I returned it to her desk. I finished it, I said. Mrs. Thompson looked up with interest. And what did you think? It was good, I replied quietly. The boy in the story reminded me of someone. Oh? She asked with a small smile. Who? I hesitated for a moment. Me. She did not laugh or look surprised. Instead, she simply nodded, as if she had expected that answer. Well, she said gently, that boy in the story worked very hard and never gave up. I shrugged. He was smarter than me. Mrs. Thompson leaned back in her chair. Daniel, she said calmly, being smart is not the most important thing. What matters is believing that you can improve. I did not answer, but her words stayed in my mind. From that day forward, she began giving me extra writing assignments. They were not difficult, but they forced me to think. Sometimes she asked me to write about my dreams. Other times she asked me to describe a moment in my life. At first I wrote very little, but slowly my paragraphs became longer. One day she asked me to stay after school again. I walked slowly to her desk, wondering what I had done wrong. Instead, she placed a piece of paper in front of me. It was my latest essay. At the top of the page, written in red ink, were 2 words. Excellent work. I stared at the paper in disbelief. No teacher had ever written something like that on my work before. You see, she said kindly, you have a talent for expressing your thoughts. I felt my face grow warm. I just wrote what I felt, I said quietly. That's exactly what good writers do, she replied. After that moment, something changed inside my mind. For the first time, I began to believe that maybe I could succeed in school, but life outside school was still difficult. One evening, my mother sat at the kitchen table with a pile of bills in front of her. Her face looked tired and worried. Mom? I asked. She forced a small smile. Everything is fine, she said. But I knew it was not. A few days later, I discovered something that made my heart sink. I overheard my mother speaking on the phone with my aunt. I don't know how we will pay for Daniel's school supplies next month, she said quietly. The rent already took most of my paycheck. I stood in the hallway listening, feeling helpless. At that moment, I realized something painful. Even if I wanted to do well in school, our family might not have the money to support my education. The next day, I went to school feeling distracted and worried. During class, Mrs. Thompson noticed my silence. Daniel, she asked gently, is everything all right? I hesitated, but finally I told her the truth. My mom might not be able to pay for some school things next month, I admitted. It's not important. I can just stop participating in those activities. Mrs. Thompson looked at me thoughtfully. Let's not worry about that right now, she said. I nodded, but I still felt ashamed. The following week, something strange happened. The school announced a writing competition for students. The winner would receive a small scholarship and several new books. Mrs. Thompson encouraged the entire class to participate. When she reached my desk, she placed the entry form in front of me. You should try, she said. I shook my head immediately. There are many better students, I replied. She leaned closer and spoke quietly. I believe you can do it. Her confidence surprised me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again while my sister slept. The apartment was silent except for the sound of the clock on the wall. Slowly, I began writing. I wrote about my family, about the struggles we faced, and about the hope that life could still improve. The words came from deep inside my heart. When I finished, I felt both nervous and proud. The next day, I handed my essay to Mrs. Thompson. She read it carefully while sitting at her desk. When she finished, she looked up at me with shining eyes. Daniel, she said softly, this is powerful. Her reaction made my hands shake slightly. Do you really think it's good? I asked. I do, she answered firmly. Weeks passed, and eventually the school announced the competition results during a morning assembly. Students gathered in the large gymnasium, while the principal stood on the stage holding a list of names. My heart beat quickly as he began reading the winners. 3rd place, 2nd place. Then he paused before saying the final name. 1st place goes to Daniel Carter. For a moment, I thought I had heard wrong, but the entire room turned toward me. Students began clapping. Mrs. Thompson was standing near the back of the gym, smiling proudly. I slowly walked toward the stage, feeling like I was dreaming. The principal handed me a certificate, several books, and the small scholarship prize. As I looked at the audience, my eyes found Mrs. Thompson again. She gave me a small nod. In that moment, I realized something important. For the first time in my life, someone truly believed in me. And because of that belief, I had started believing in myself. But what I did not know at the time was that Mrs. Thompson was doing much more for me than simple encouragement. Years later, I would discover a truth that would shock me completely. A truth she had quietly hidden for a very long time. And that secret would finally be revealed on the day she retired from teaching. Winning the writing competition changed many things for me. For the first time, teachers at school began noticing me. Some of them congratulated me in the hallway. A few even asked me to join extra academic activities, but the person who seemed happiest was Mrs. Thompson. The day after the announcement, she called me to her desk again. "I knew you could do it," she said with a proud smile. I looked down at the certificate in my hands. "I almost didn't enter the competition," I admitted. "I'm very glad you changed your mind," she replied. After that moment, my confidence continued to grow. I worked harder in my classes and spent more time reading and writing. Mrs. Thompson often gave me new books, saying I could borrow them whenever I wanted. Years passed faster than I expected. By the time I finished high school, I had become one of the top students in my class. My grades helped me earn a scholarship to attend a good university. On the day I graduated from high school, Mrs. Thompson hugged me and said something I would never forget. "You're going to do great things, Daniel." I promised myself I would make her proud. At university, I studied computer science. The classes were difficult, but I worked hard. I remembered how Mrs. Thompson believed in me when no one else did. Whenever I felt like giving up, I thought about her words. Years later, I graduated with honors. My career slowly began to grow. I started a small technology company with 2 friends, and after many struggles, the business finally succeeded. Life became busy. Work, travel, and responsibilities filled my days. But even with all my success, I never forgot Mrs. Thompson. Every year, I sent her a letter telling her about my progress. Sometimes she replied with short messages encouraging me to keep moving forward. Then one day, many years later, I received a surprising invitation. My old school was organizing a retirement ceremony for Mrs. Thompson. She had been teaching for more than 30 years. When I read the letter, I immediately decided to attend. The ceremony took place in the same gymnasium where I had once stood as a nervous student during the writing competition. But this time, I was sitting in the audience as an adult. Many former students had returned to celebrate Mrs. Thompson's career. Some were doctors, others were teachers, artists, or business owners. It seemed like everyone had a story about how she had helped them. When Mrs. Thompson finally walked onto the stage, the entire room stood up and applauded. She looked older than I remembered, but her warm smile had not changed. The principal gave a long speech about her dedication and kindness. Then he invited her to say a few words. Mrs. Thompson stepped to the microphone and looked at the crowd. For a moment she seemed emotional. "I have been very lucky," she began. "Teaching has allowed me to meet many wonderful students." She spoke about the importance of education and how proud she felt watching her students grow into successful adults. Then she paused. "There is something I have never told anyone," she said softly. The room became completely silent. Mrs. Thompson looked down at the paper in her hands, then back at the audience. "Many years ago," she continued, "one of my students was struggling very much. He was intelligent, but life was difficult for his family. My heart suddenly began beating faster. I had a strange feeling she was talking about me. I believe strongly that this student deserved a chance," she said. Then she took a deep breath before continuing. "So I quietly used my own money to help him." Murmurs spread across the audience. "I paid for some of his school supplies and competition fees," she explained. "I never told him because I didn't want him to feel embarrassed." My mind went completely still. Suddenly I understood. The scholarship competition, the books she had given me, even the activities I thought the school had paid for. Tears filled my eyes. She had been helping me all along. Mrs. Thompson continued speaking. "That student worked harder than anyone I had ever seen. Watching him succeed became one of the greatest joys of my life." At that moment, she looked directly toward my seat in the audience. Our eyes met, and she smiled. The entire room turned toward me. I could barely stand as I walked toward the stage. When I reached her, I hugged her tightly. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. She gently patted my shoulder. "Because you didn't need to know," she said. "All you needed was a chance." I could not stop the tears from falling. Everything I had achieved suddenly felt connected to this one woman who had believed in me when I was just a lost boy sitting in the back of a classroom. Without her, my life would have been completely different. That day, I made a promise to myself. I would never forget the person who changed my life, and I would always try to help others the same way she helped me. Because sometimes a single act of kindness can shape an entire future. And sometimes the people who help us the most are the ones who never ask for recognition. They simply believe in us when we cannot believe in ourselves. If this heartfelt story touched your heart, don't forget to support the channel. Subscribe to Cozy English Story for more emotional and inspiring English stories that help you improve your listening while enjoying powerful life lessons. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a teacher or someone who changed your life forever? Your story might inspire someone else today.